In this tutorial, I will show you how to create update query using ajax request in laravel. So go to our demonstration first. So here you can see our laravel project. In our previous videos, we have created Ajax data table, complete Ajax data table, and we have created insert record using ajax request in laravel. So in here, today we need to get update query and get data into form field using ajax request and update record. So here you can see our completely project. Before create the update record, we need to get the data into our form field using our data table belong to record ID. So we need to do some modification of our data table and our form fields. So let's move to our project now. I open my VS Code editor. Here is our previous created project. So let me go to our Ajax data table. We create the data table function. In here, I will start in the data table function. Here is the endpoint. So I copy this section and make the comma and paste. I use my record ID. Record ID means my database record ID. I use the paste the data, and I'm also record ID. The title is operation, and I remove this content. So now I use the buttons for our record ID. I use the font erasing buttons. Additionally, column I added for our operation function. Yeah, there was a problem in our data table. Let me check that one. For now, I comment the content. You can see our record ID data coming into our operation section, because most essential, because we need the parameters for passing our record ID. That's why I get the record ID. So I can change my entire content now. Let me uncomment these code lines. I use the return section, and I create the class for text now wrap class. So this is not essential, but I create this one for our HTML lines. I use the meta tag CSRF token content. Let me paste it. This section we inserted our header section also. When we have created the project, we use the CSRF token. In here, our data table section also, we need to use the CSRF token in our meta content. So that's why I use it. Let me add the button. I'm going to add the button. I close the button now. In here, I use the onClick function for our data get into field. So I use the onClick function. The function name get user data. Inside the function, I use the record ID. The record ID means we get the record ID to this function. The data means we pass the parameter data, so it's a record ID. So I will explain it to you later. Inside this function I use the class called button. The button name is success. So now I can add my font icon. So I use the font icon here. I use the far edit icon, which means the pencil icon show in our edit field. So now I add the plus mark and hit enter. So let me copy the same thing here. And I paste the same thing. I remove this plus mark here. I change the on-click name as delete details. I keep the function ID, function data in the same way because we don't need to change this one. Let me change the success. I change it to danger. Danger in our text color it look like a red color, and I change the icon for dash trash. TRS trash. So now our data table operation content, which means our edit icon and delete icon, we have created success. Now we can add the other font awesome icon link. So I have already that icon, so I use this icon. So if you want to use the font awesome icons, you can get to the font awesome link, which means you can get it through the Google. I paste my font awesome link here. If you want, I will put this link into my description panel. So let me run my project again. In here you can see our operation section. We added the trash icon and edit icon. So it is look like this. Let me test this. The on-click function is working or not. So I use the window.alert function inside the. I get this function name, get user data, and I use this. I created the new function inside this script. I created the function and I paste that function, which means our get user data, and close the open bracket and close curly brackets. I create the window.alert for test our function work or not. So I type here something, test data. Now we can run and click the button. How that look like? Now you can see our test data working, which means our alert working success. That means our this function is working perfectly. So I will remove this one. Now I'm going to create some modification in our form field, which means we need to add the button here for insert record. The form content means the update function which is going on the same function, which means the insert and update both functions are going inside the same form. That's why I use the insert button here, which means when the page load in, the form will hide and when we need to create the insert record, when we have to click this button here. I use the button here. When we click this button, the form will show, and also the edit, the form will show, unless the form is hiding. So that's why I use these buttons for form hide and show. Let me create the button first. I go to my code again. Inside the jumbotron, I use the button. I create the d.row. The margin top will be 3, and I create the ID here inside the div ID main button. I use d.call nd12. Inside that I use the button view1 and create the class. I create the btn class for our button. I use the btn success and btn block function. I create the onClick function also. I name that onClick function. The onClick equal show insert form data. This is our function name, and our button name, it should be type. Sorry, I name the button type equal button. So I name it here new. I use the new user. Let me run the project. You can see here a button has been created success. Now we can create our other functions for button hide and show. So I open my VS Code editor and go to the script section. Inside the script section, I use this we created onClick function. So insert form data. I create the function here. Function. I paste the function name. So all the things done now. And also insert the form section in here to here. I create the form name. I give the ID form name. Form 1. I give the ID. The panel ID name is a form 1. So I copy the ID. And inside the our show insert form section, I use this jQuery ID. So I use the $mark and bracket. Inside the bracket I use the form 1 and create.show and close the function. And again I create the ID for text for manage, and I give the value as a function insert data. So I will explain this in the later, because I need to add the another line for my function. I create the variable let btn data equal. I get the button data variable which equal, so plus equal I give the break here, and I add the btn main for our button data HTML content. The btn main means we create the we create here main button. I get this button name, main button, which means I paste the main button or name here, which this naming is this ID contain our HTML content, which means we insert our onClick function here. The same onClick function we are creating inside this HTML content. This is the jQuery function. So I use the button for inside this section. Let me add this one. I create the button type equal button, and onClick function is show height form. The class name btn primary and btn block, and margin left equal 3. The form name, button name is height form. So I copy this onClick function name. Inside this onClick function name, I use function. I paste the show form function. I get this function name and create the new function show height form. So I create the height form function. Before I write the form, I get this data, which means our text name value equals 0, text last name value equals 0, text email value equals 0. Then I create the form. I get the data form, which means I use this form for height. So I get the form ID, form 1, ID name is form 1, and the function is height. And let me add the same content. I paste it, and inside this onClick function I get the show insert form data, which means when our form is hiding, the show insert form data button show in the panel. So that's why I use this onClick function. I change the button type, show form, and button should be success. Button should be success. And all the run now project now. Now I use the separate function, which name is show edit form. Show edit form means we created the onClick function inside our Java data table. So we create the get user data function. So that is this function, because when you click that button, the form field data will show. So that's why we use that one. I get the form. When we click the button, the form, it should be show inside this function. So that's why I use it. And I get the text for manage data. This should be edit data, edit underscore data. And let me change the button. So edit button, I use the show insert form data function because it's all the same way for insert the data. I change the button name. I use the button class info, and button name also change. Create the edit data. Edit form. And go to my HTML button. I create the new div. I get this button and cut paste. inside this button I use the ID called submit button. Class form action, form dash action, sorry, and I get this submit button into my show edit form. I create the variable submit data. The submit data also equal to our this button. So inside this button we get the ID. We create the ID submit button. Inside that button we get for our HTML constraint. So that's why we use the submit data. So let me run the project now. Now we can see our show and hide buttons working perfectly. Now we can hide our form. I will hide the form. I go to my document.ready function. Here's my document.ready function. I paste this ID. Sorry, I need to get the ID name, and also I paste the ID. Here also I paste the ID, here also I paste the ID. Then I insert the hide function for my main form. So it's look like this. Now you can see our form hiding. Yeah, our form hide. Now when you insert the button, you can see our form is shown. When we hide the form is hiding. We also do the same things. When you click this button, the panel will show, which means the edit panel will show. So we will create it later, which means we need to fix this function, because we need to get the data. When inside this function we need to call that edit function name when it's working. So now we have to do I need to add the separate ID for our input field ID and our button name. So I go to my first name in input field. Let me add the two input fields name. I create input text for manage, and which type is text. We will hide this old text, and here also the type equal text and txt use id, which mean our record id. So I use the txt use id for our to get our record id, and txt for management we use the insert and update two functions. When the insert function equal true, the record we can insert. When the update function equal true, we can update the record. So I copy this txt manage. So you can see we created inside this txt for manage and txt for manage. Later I paste this here, txt for manage and also txt for manage. So these are the most essential. Now we can go to our controller, which means inside the get user data we pass the ajax request for get our controller data. So that's why I go to my controller, I open my controller and I create new function name called get data into user fields, get data into form fields. So I create the function name here. Let me add the comment for this. Get user data into fields. I create the function, public function get user data. I pass the parameter required. Same things we are doing. We pass the response array and we get the result. I create the result variable which equal to our db : table. Our table name is, let me add my table name, data models, and inside this we create the where clause where we get our record ID. Let me add my record ID. Get my record ID from my table. And equal to my request ID. This ID is essential for us because we pass the record ID for our ajax request using this parameter. So now we create the get method inside this. So let me explain this on. We create the response array and we pass the result variable equal to our db colon our table models and their record ID which equal to our request ID, and we pass the get method, and here we create the if result not equal 1, which means our result equal true, we pass the response data array which equal to our result, and we pass the status 200 status we passed, and inside this 200 status we create the message array. The message array call you have selected user data has been loaded into your field, and if this is not true, which means there is error, we create the else function. The else function content on status 500, which means the intervals of error. So that's why our record is working. Now we can add the echo JSON encode response function because we encode the entire data. So there is some error inside this function, so let me fix that. Which means there is a result table our error is fixing because it's not error, it's just the editor indicate running. So I copy my function name and I go to my web.php because we need to create the new route for our get fields. I use the post route here. I use the post name, get data into fields, control names, and we pass the other functional name. Now we can pass this URL for our AJAX request. Let me go to my view file. Now we can create our function. So you know in the previous time we create the function get user data. So let me create the function. In first I use the pass the ID. ID means when we create the controller request ID we get, so that ID we passed our function ID. So I create the Ajax, close the curly bracket and bracket, and type equal post. URL means we create the URL for our in here we create our URL, we get data into fields. I pass the URL into my Ajax URL. So I create the data. Inside the data we use ID and underscore token for CSRF token. For my Ajax request, so I use the data type which equal to JSON, and I create the success method. The success function means success function and close the bracket. I use the show edit form function here, which means I told you to for when we create our show edit form we need to call that function name inside our get user function. So that's why I use this function name. Inside I create the condition if my result name equal 500, which means there is internal server error, else there will be passing 200 is status, which means the success is status. So I will change this else equal to if, and so I copy the same thing, pass to 200. So this txt user ID means we create our hidden fields, txt user ID, you can see, and we get the our record ID, and txt first name, which means our first name. This is our input field name, txt first name. This is my database name. This is my txt last name. This is my database last name. This is my txt email. This is my email in my database table. So let me run the project. You can see there's an error in my console panel, so there's some syntax. Let me show the error number. So inside this function there is error, so let me fix this one. So let me run my project again. So all the things done on our project. Now we can click our edit icon. You can see here our ID has been passed and our data also coming into our form fields. Now change another one. I click this ID 9. So you can see here our data is coming success. So now we have to add the new function for inside of a controller, call to our update record. So I go to my controller name, and I create the function. Let me create the function update user data. I paste and I close the brackets and I use the response array. And after I create the array called user, inside the user array I pass my database name, database table value, which means our user we pass the column name, first name, and get the request. Inside the request we pass the txt first name. And same things doing for my other fields. You can see here I pass my first name and I pass my last name, email, and get the request data through my txt last name, txt email, which means txt last name, txt email means my input fields data. So I pass this my input fields data using this type. Now I create the query result table. My table name is data models. Inside that I use the query for where my record ID is equal to request.txt user ID, and now I can update query. For update user means this user array I pass for my update function. So results means we created result variable for my query. This user ID means txt user ID means we created txt user ID for hidden fields. So let me show it. Here you can see my txt user ID, and when I click the new one you can see the number will change. This is for my txt ID. This ID is coming to my controller, so that's why I use this txt user ID. So let me do the same things for my response data. So if my result data is equal to 200, the success message will show the user record has been updated success. If this my records will false, which means it's not true, so I'll pass the response array if there is internal sub error. So this is my response look like this. So now I use an encode my response data. I pass here JSON encode response. Let me go to my web.php file. I paste this my update user data. Now I get my route. I copy my route here. I pass this data controller. I pass my function name here. Now I change my link. I pass the update user details. Let me go to my file name, view file, and inside this file I use ajax request for insert record. So I cut this section. I cut this full section, and now I create the condition. If inside the condition I pass my cut data. So now you can see my insert data function. So I create the txt for manage and insert data. I get that, I copy that, and I paste it my if condition. If txt for managed value which is equal to insert data, the form it look like insert. When me same things for update, I copy the same things and I paste below the insert section. This is my update data. This is my insert data ajax function. So let me copy the edit function here, edit data, go to txt for manage value, which means edit data, which means data equal edit data. So we can pass the other request URL. So I can go my PHP file and I copy the update user data details link and I passed into my ajax URL. So let me run my project again. So let me insert some data. I use the insert data test insert data at gmail.com. Let me submit form. So form is not submitted since there is some error. So let me go to my form has some error. Let me fix it. Input name txt manage, type equal OK. Let me change the result type. I change it to info. And this is okay. Update user detail is working. Data also okay. So let me run the project. Yeah, now you can see my form fields working, which means when we run my project, you can see the insert record data is showing, insert data is showing. When I click the operation file for edit data, you can see the edit data auto change. So let me add some insert data. Now I add the insert data, insert record, last name rec from test insert at gmail.com and submit form. You can see our record has been success. Now same things we need to do for our edit field. So let me change this up. I change the record ID. You can see to our insert record ID. I change this one. Test record ID, update data, update record. At gmail.com. So now we can update the data. You can see here this has been updated success. Now you can see updated record, test record, update data, updated record has been success. So let me change another one. Sorry, I run my project again. I change the first row. I change the name here, Harry Potter. Update data. I use the here you can see our record has been success, update success. So you can see Harry Potter update data, Harry Potter update gmail.com. So this is the way of our update query working, and this is how we are using the ajax request for update data. So our entire data working like this. And let me hide this form, hide input fields. So this is for testing purpose we use. In the front end fields we don't need to show this edit data and use id field, so that's why we remove. Let me hide this off. Txt begin. Same thing do for my other fields. Now we can see our fields has been removed success from our front end form. And if this is helpful for you, you can subscribe me, and so please put your comment, because it's most essential for me for my growing up projects. And so thanks for watching my video, and have a nice day to all. Thanks.